Trump's role in the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. They say that in the Middle East, peace is a word that lasts as long as a breath. Yet, when the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was announced, a name resurfaced in the eye of the storm. Donald Trump. Loved by some, hated by others, he once again moved the pieces on the political chessboard with the same boldness that made him an impossible figure to ignore. While many believed his era of influence was over, Trump proved that, in the game of diplomacy and power, those who know the rules can change them at any moment. The curious thing is that his approach defied everything analysts expected. Instead of emotional appeals, he used strategy and pragmatism. Instead of seeking international recognition, he sought concrete results, albeit controversial ones. Some accused him of manipulating peace as a political asset. Others saw a leader willing to do what no one else had the courage to attempt. The paradox is this: a man known for generating conflict is now the bridge to a ceasefire in one of the most unstable regions on the planet. But what's behind this move? It would have been a visionary move by diplomacy or just a well-orchestrated power struggle? To understand this, we need to look beyond the headlines and delve into the maze of negotiations, where influence, self-interest, and survival go hand in hand. Because when it comes to Trump, nothing is quite what it seems. Trump's resumption of influence in the Middle East. When Trump reappeared on the political scene, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Many thought his influence over Israel, Hamas, and the Middle East itself had already run its course, but time has shown otherwise. With every speech, every calculated gesture, he made it clear that he still had cards up his sleeve. He was like a seasoned player returning to the table, and everyone knew he wouldn't just come back to observe. The mere rumor of his intervention was enough to stir diplomatic corridors and provoke reactions in Gaza and Washington. What few realized is that, for Trump, the ceasefire, it wasn't just a political issue. It was an opportunity to reassert American power in a region marked by distrust and rivalry. While many spoke of diplomacy, he spoke of results, pressing behind the scenes and reminding leaders that influence and strategy go hand in hand. Sources close to him report that, even out of office, he maintained open lines with Israeli advisors and business people involved in the reconstruction of Gaza. It was as if he sought to forge peace his own way, without following the traditional diplomatic playbook. And it was precisely this direct, sometimes provocative manner that reignited discussions about his leadership. Trump understood something few admit. In the Middle East, negotiations are not driven by words alone, but by demonstrations of strength and trust. While leaders tried to maintain neutrality, he was already planning his next steps. And that's where the story begins to deepen. Because what happened behind the scenes, peace deal was much more strategic than the public imagines. The backstage of the negotiations. Little is known about what actually happened behind closed doors during the negotiations of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But one thing is certain: Trump was never just a spectator. He moved his pieces behind the scenes like a veteran strategist. While diplomats exchanged formal reports, he made direct calls, activated former allies, and pressured governments that still owed political favors to his previous administration. Traditional diplomacy operated in broad daylight. His, in the shadows of power. In the corridors of Washington, some called him the ghost negotiator, present without being officially there. He used his network of influence like a carefully woven web, connecting leaders, military officials, and business people with interests in both Israel and Gaza. Trump understood that the Middle East isn't resolved with speeches, but with agreements that affect the economy, territory, and above all, national pride. His style? Fewer formal conversations, more direct exchanges, where every word carried the weight of a threat or promise. It was in this tense environment that he began to influence the peace deal silently but decisively. As the world watched the bombings cease, few knew that behind the apparent balance lay a delicate seam, held together by ambition and a sense of opportunity. Trump didn't just want peace, he wanted to be remembered as the man capable of imposing it when no one else believed in it. And just at that point, when the agreement seemed poised to be sealed, something began to shift at the negotiating table. The construction of the agreement. When the peace deal began to take shape, Trump demonstrated why his influence still resonated among Israeli leaders and international mediators. He wasn't advocating a symbolic ceasefire. He wanted something that could be demonstrated as a practical, tangible result with immediate political impact. He was the one who insisted on economic clauses tied to the reconstruction of Gaza, proposing American private partnerships to boost local development. For him, peace without financial progress was merely a temporary truce. This pragmatic approach, combining diplomacy, power, and business, made even skeptics pay attention. But Trump's style was anything but conventional. Instead of long talks and neutral speeches, he preferred direct pressure. In private meetings, he questioned Israeli officials about the costs of prolonging the conflict, while also warning leaders close to Hamas about the political isolation they would face. This push-and-pull tactic reflected his vision of leadership. Peace, yes, but on his terms. Some saw it as arrogance. Others, a show of force that the Middle East, tired of empty promises, might need. And that's how the deal was born. Stitched together between tension and strategy. Forged by conflicting interests, but bearing Trump's unmistakable stamp. He knew that a ceasefire, a lasting agreement, required more than signatures. It required narrative control, visibility, and prestige. Therefore, he ensured that his name would be associated not only with the end of the attacks, but also with the idea of stability. However, every achievement comes at a price. And soon after the agreement was announced, reactions began to emerge. Not all of them favorable. International reactions and criticism. When the announcement of the ceasefire was confirmed, the world reacted as if a thunderclap had cut through the silence. Some leaders celebrated the return of American diplomacy under Trump, while others saw his participation as a self-promotional ploy. The UN was cautious, praising the immediate end to violence in Gaza, but raising doubts about the agreement's sustainability. In Brussels, European diplomats murmured that the agreement smelled more of campaigning than compassion. Still, no one could deny the fact. Trump had somehow made the impossible happen, at least for a moment. But, as always, international politics isn't all praise. Critics have argued that peace deal benefited U.S. interests more than the Palestinian people. Some analysts pointed out that the American presence in the negotiations rekindled old suspicions, especially among Hamas allies. The global media plunged into heated debates, questioning whether the goal was truly peace or merely the reassertion of American influence in the Middle East. It was the old power game repeating itself, disguised under the guise of diplomacy. While some saw Trump as an architect of stability, others called him an engineer of controlled chaos. And perhaps that was indeed his intention: to keep the world on alert, reminding everyone that no peace can be sustained without vigilance. With each new interview, he fueled the mystery, sometimes promising balance, sometimes hinting that new challenges lay ahead. And these challenges would soon emerge, because keeping the agreement alive would perhaps be more difficult than establishing it. The post-agreement challenges none ceasefire in the Middle East is sustained only by signatures, and Trump knew it. The real test began the next day when the cameras went off and the streets of Gaza still smelled of gunpowder. The agreement, hammered out with such pressure and urgency, would now need to withstand the force of mistrust and vested interests. Israel demanded security guarantees. Hamas demanded reconstruction promises that seemed more rhetorical than concrete. And in the midst of this, Trump tried to maintain his image as leader of peace, balancing power and unpredictability like few others could. Regional instability, however, did not wait long to test the limits of peace deal. Small attacks, acts of sabotage, and inflammatory speeches began to reappear, like sparks ready to reignite the fire. American diplomacy, even under Trump's influence, faced resistance both old and new. Arab countries were suspicious of the intentions behind the agreement. European allies called for more transparency. Trump, with his direct and provocative style, seemed to respond with a smile, as if to say the game only ends when he decides. This stance divided opinions, but kept everyone's attention. And it is at this point that the post-agreement reveals its complexity. More than peace, what was at stake was the narrative of power. Trump transformed the ceasefire on a global stage, where every statement, every gesture, was calculated to reinforce his authority. Even though the future of the agreement was uncertain, his mark was imprinted there, in history, in speeches, and above all, in the perception that, like it or not, he had once again shaken the wheels of the Middle East. But what no one knew was that the unfolding of this political game was just beginning. Trump's role in the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Ultimately, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was more than a political agreement. It mirrored the ambitions, contradictions, and strategies that drive global power. Trump demonstrated that, even out of office, he is still capable of influencing decisions that shape the future of the Middle East. His methods may be questioned, but the impact they left is impossible to deny. Perhaps this is his greatest lesson. True power doesn't depend on office, but on the ability to move people, ideas, and nations with a vision, no matter how controversial. Now the big question is, can peace truly be sustained when it's born of pressure and self-interest? Or will it just be another truce disguised as hope? Think about it. Who benefits, who loses, and who truly sets the course of negotiations when the world isn't looking? The landscape may change, leaders may step aside, but the gears continue to turn at the same silent, calculated pace of diplomacy. If this topic has sparked your curiosity to understand what really happens behind the speeches and headlines, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll discover what most people prefer to hide: the stories, the behind-the-scenes details, and the secrets of power that shape the world we live in.